like a dewdrop falling into the ocean, transforms all the water in the world. So a few simple words spoken beside a mountain stream forever changed humanity's understanding of strength and wisdom. In the 6th century before the Common Era, when iron swords decided the fates of kingdoms and the smoke of battles veiled the sky over the Middle Kingdom, a teaching was born about how softness conquers hardness. An elder with penetrating eyes left the world 81 enigmatic verses and dissolved into the western mountains like morning mist. A general, observing the dance of a crane and a snake, discovered the secret of victory without battle. A poet, drinking wine beneath the moon, found in simple words the reflection of eternity. They were united by one truth, simple as breathing and deep as the sea. Follow the flow of life, and it will carry you further than any resistance. But what lies hidden behind this apparent simplicity? What power do the principles of water hold? Principles that transformed the art of war, poetry, and the very philosophy of existence. Allow the warm light of a candle to gently touch your eyelids, and let your breathing become deeper and calmer. Imagine yourself standing on the bank of an ancient stream, where silence is broken only by the melodious babbling of water over smooth stones. The air is filled with the fragrance of mountain herbs and the barely perceptible scent of rain that will soon fall upon the earth. Somewhere in the distance, the sound of a bamboo flute can be heard, gentle, haunting, as if nature itself were singing of eternal mysteries. The wind carries with it the coolness of mountain peaks and the rustle of leaves from ancient pines that remember times when the world was young. In this peace, in this blessed silence, thoughts were born that would change the course of history. Here, simple people discovered the deepest truths, watching how water finds its way among stones, never fighting with obstacles, but always conquering them through patience and persistence. Mist spread over the yellow river like the breath of a sleeping dragon. In this haze, the outlines of ancient cities were lost, where people lived in constant fear. The 6th century, before the Common Era, proved especially cruel for the lands that would later be called the Celestial Empire. The sounds of battles came from everywhere. the clash of swords against shields, the cries of the wounded, the thunder of horse hooves on mud mixed with blood. In those times, when rulers fought each other for patches of land, and common people did not know if they would see tomorrow's dawn, a different wisdom was born in the silence of mountain caves and along the banks of winding rivers. It came not with the thunder of chariots, but quietly, like morning dew on bamboo leaves. Old sages, those who remembered even more ancient times when the world was whole, sat by their hearths and observed. They watched how water flows around stones, not fighting them, but steadily wearing down their surface. They saw how wind bends mighty oaks, while the slender willow remains unharmed, swaying in rhythm with the elements. And in these simple observations lay a depth that could change the world. One such sage lived not far from the capital of the Zhou kingdom. His hut stood on a hillside, from where a valley could be seen, where armies of conquerors endlessly replaced each other. Every morning, he would go to the stream that ran beside his house and gaze long at the water. Neighbors considered him eccentric. What could one see in an ordinary stream? But the old man knew more. Water never argued with obstacles. Meeting a stone in its path, it flowed around it, finding thousands of ways to continue its journey. If the way was completely blocked, it patiently accumulated until it found an outlet. And most amazing of all, it always sought the lowest place, toward the sea, choosing the easiest path, yet possessing the power to carve canyons and move boulders. On days when the thunder of war particularly approached his valley, the sage noticed how the water's behavior changed. The stream became muddy from dust raised by marching armies, but after a few days, it regained its clarity. Water was not afraid of pollution. It knew that everything was temporary, that silted particles would settle, and it would remain pure. Gradually, people began coming to the old man. At first, they were neighbors, tired of constant fear. They brought their sorrows. Someone had lost a son in battle. Someone had lost a home burned by the enemy. And the sage did not comfort them with loud words about heroism and glory. Instead, he would seat his guests by the stream and ask them simply to watch. A young woman whose husband had died in battle sat on the bank and wept. Her tears fell into the water, but the stream did not become sorrowful from this. It accepted them and carried them onward to the sea, where all griefs dissolved in infinity. Gradually, the woman understood. Sorrow, like joy, is not eternal. It comes and goes, like the seasons, like tides and ebbs. A warrior, wounded in the last battle, limped and raged at his weakness. He was accustomed to solving problems with force, and now felt helpless. The sage showed him how water penetrates the tiniest cracks in rock, and freezing in winter destroys even the hardest granite. Strength is not always about striking harder. Sometimes patience and persistence achieve what brute force cannot reach. A merchant who had lost all his goods in another raid complained about the world's injustice. But the old man pointed to a tree that grew by the very water. Its roots drank from the stream, but the tree itself demanded nothing from the water. It simply existed nearby, and water found its own way to it. When we stop desperately grasping for what seems necessary to us, what we need comes by itself. With each day, more and more people gathered around the modest hut. They came not for teaching in the usual sense. The sage rarely spoke in long speeches. He showed simple things: how grass grows, how birds build nests, how the color of the sky changes before dawn. And in this simplicity, people found answers to the most complex questions. One young official, exhausted by intrigues at court, asked how he should deal with envious people and enemies. The sage took some water from the stream in his hands and showed how it seeped through his fingers. Try to hold it by force. It flows away. But if you cup your palms like a boat and don't squeeze, it remains. So it is with people. The more we try to control them, the stronger they resist. Gradually, rumors reached the royal court about the strange hermit who taught people to be like water. Some courtiers laughed. What use could there be from such softness in a world ruled by the sword? But those who had visited the stream returned changed. They became calmer, wiser, and strangely stronger. In those times, when it seemed the world had finally plunged into chaos, when each day brought new troubles and the future was lost in the fog of uncertainty, this simple wisdom about the strength of gentleness became a seed that would sprout through the centuries. People began to understand. There is another way, not the one that leads through violence and coercion. And when the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in colors of peach and gold, the stream still quietly ran in its channel, carrying in itself the reflection of stars and the wisdom of ages. In its murmur sounded a song about how true strength is not in breaking an obstacle, but in finding a way around it while preserving one's essence and direction. Legends differ in details, but all agree on one thing. On the day when the old man decided to leave the world of people, the sky was especially clear. Perhaps he sensed that the time of his apprenticeship to nature was coming to an end, and the time to pass knowledge to people was just beginning. Or perhaps he was simply tired of how slowly the world was changing, how difficult it was for people to accept the simple truth that gentleness is stronger than hardness. His name was Li Er, but he was better known as Laozi, the old teacher. On that day, he gathered his few possessions, drank one last time from the water of his native stream, and set out on his journey. His path lay westward, where beyond high mountains lay unexplored lands, where the sounds of wars did not reach, and where one could dissolve in the silence of the desert. The road was long and difficult. Dust covered his simple clothes. The sun blazed mercilessly, and at night, in the mountains, it became so cold that breath turned into white clouds. But Laozi walked calmly, without haste, stopping to rest at every spring, listening to the sound of wind in the gorges. At the border of the kingdom, where the road climbed to the Hangu Pass, stood a frontier post. The commander of the post was called Yin Shi, and he was no ordinary guard. This man could read signs in nature, understood the language of stars, and sensed the approach of unusual events. On that morning, when Laozi approached the post, Yin Shi saw a strange glow in the east, as if a purple cloud was rising over the road. When an old man in simple clothes appeared before the gates, with a staff in his hand and wise eyes, Yin Shi immediately understood. This was the one the omens had foretold. He bowed to the traveler and asked him to stop, not as a commander of the post demanding documents, but as a student who had met a teacher. Yin Akai knew about the sage who lived by the stream and taught people to be like water. Rumors had reached even these remote places. And now, when the teacher was about to leave the world forever, the commander of the post dared to ask for the impossible, to leave people his knowledge. 3 days and 3 nights Laozi spent at the post. He sat in a small room where Yin Shi had prepared bamboo tablets and a brush for him. Outside the window, the wind rustled. Somewhere in the distance, mountain birds cried. And below, in the gorge, a torrent rushed, hurrying toward the great river. And the old sage began to write. He wrote slowly, carefully choosing each character, as if each sign carried a part of his soul. He wrote about the Tao, about the way that cannot be named in ordinary words, about the force that moves everything in the universe while remaining invisible and imperceptible. He wrote about how a wise ruler governs without governing, how a true hero wins without fighting, how real beauty reveals itself only to one who does not chase after it. Line by line, a teaching took shape, simple and profound at the same time, understandable to a child and inexhaustible for a sage. 81 verses lay on the bamboo tablets. Each was short, but behind the brevity lay bottomless depth. As in a drop of dew, the whole sky is reflected. So in each line, the entire wisdom about how to live in harmony with the natural order of things was reflected. When the work was finished, Laozi rose and went out into the courtyard of the post. It was early morning. The air was transparent and cold, and the first rays of the sun played on the mountain peaks. He handed the tablets to Yin Shi, and without saying a word, headed for the gates. The commander of the post watched as the figure of the old man receded along the mountain path, became smaller and smaller, until it dissolved in the morning mist. No one ever saw Laozi again. They said he reached the westernmost limits of the earth, where sky meets desert, and there dissolved into infinity. But the tablets remained. Yin Shi carefully preserved them, copied them, shared them with those few who could understand. Thus came into the world the book that would later be called the Tao De Jing, the book of the way and virtue. It contained no complex philosophical constructions, no calls to glory or wealth. There was only the simple truth that real strength comes when we stop fighting the flow of life and learn to move in harmony with it. Years passed. The tablets were copied again and again. The words of the sage spread throughout China, finding response in the hearts of those who were tired of endless wars and quarrels. And everyone who read these lines understood them in their own way, but all found in them one thing: the peace and strength that comes from accepting the natural order of things. Several decades passed after Laozi disappeared in the western mountains, and his teaching continued to spread throughout the Middle Kingdom. And it happened that one young general, whose name was Sun Wu, came upon these ancient texts at the most difficult period of his life. Sun Wu was a brilliant strategist, but he had suffered a series of defeats that called into question all his knowledge of military art. The enemies were stronger. There were more of them. And classical methods of warfare did not work. In desperation, he sought new ways and accidentally came upon lines about how the soft conquers the hard, and the weak overcomes the strong. At first, this seemed nonsense. How can softness win in battle? How can weakness overcome strength? But Sun Wu was an observant man, and he began to notice examples in nature itself. He saw how a flexible vine entwines a mighty oak and eventually strangles it. He observed how fog, so gentle and intangible, could hide an entire army and render all enemy plans useless. Slowly, a new strategy formed in his consciousness. Not strength against strength, not hardness against hardness, but something completely different. Water does not fight with stone. It flows around it and continues its path. But if the stone has a crack, water penetrates it, and freezing destroys even the strongest rock. The first opportunity to apply these principles presented itself when the army of the Wu Kingdom, commanded by Sun Wu, encountered superior enemy forces in marshy terrain. According to all canons of military art, they should retreat and seek a more advantageous position. But Sun Wu acted differently. He divided his army into many small detachments that, like streams, seeped through the marshes and appeared where no one expected them. The enemy, preparing for a frontal clash, found themselves disoriented. Their powerful formations, designed for a crushing blow, became helpless against an enemy scattered throughout the marsh. Like water that finds 1,000 ways to bypass an obstacle, Sun Wu's detachments attacked where they were not expected and disappeared before the enemy could organize resistance. They did not strive for a decisive battle. Instead, they exhausted the enemy with 1,000 small strikes, each insignificant by itself, but in sum leading to complete decomposition of the enemy army. Victory was complete, but it was achieved not through heroic feats and grandiose battles. It came through patience, flexibility, and understanding that sometimes retreat is the beginning of advance, and apparent weakness can prove to be a source of irresistible strength. This victory brought Sun Wu fame, but more importantly, it confirmed the truth of the ancient wisdom about the strength of gentleness. The general began recording his observations and reflections, creating a treatise that would later be called The Art of War. In it, military strategy was first combined with Taoist philosophy, creating a teaching about how to win without destroying, how to achieve goals while expending minimum effort. Other generals studied his methods and were amazed. Sun Wu never strove for bloody battles. The best victory, he said, is one achieved without fighting. Like water that wears away stone, not by the force of impact, but by constancy of action. So, a wise commander achieves victory not through destruction, but through understanding the natural laws of conflict. He taught his officers to be like mist, elusive and unpredictable. One should attack where the enemy is weak, retreat where he is strong, not resist his strength head-on, but direct it where it will harm him, use the enemy's energy against himself, as a martial arts master uses the attacker's force to throw him to the ground. Fame of the general who won by following the principles of water spread to all kingdoms. Not only military commanders came to learn from him, but also rulers who wanted to understand how to govern a state without constantly resorting to coercion. One such ruler, the wise king of the Yue kingdom, invited Sun Wu to court not to plan military campaigns, but to discuss the art of governance. The king understood that principles that work in military affairs might prove useful in peaceful matters as well. Sun Wu told the ruler about how wise water governs the entire valley without giving orders. It simply flows to the lowest place, and all streams find their own way to it. So too, a wise ruler creates conditions under which subjects themselves strive for what the state needs. Instead of forcing people to work under threat of punishment, it is better to create conditions under which it becomes profitable for them to work well. Instead of suppressing discontent with force, it is better to understand its causes and eliminate them, as water eliminates obstacles in its path, not by destroying them, but by flowing around them. These conversations had a profound influence on the art of governance in ancient China. Gradually, a new philosophy of power was formed, based not on fear and coercion, but on understanding the natural laws of human nature. A ruler following the Tao does not strive to control every step of his subjects. He creates conditions under which they themselves choose the right path. Thus, the principles of water, discovered by the old sage by the stream, came through military art into politics and state governance. Gentleness proved truly stronger than hardness, and flexibility more reliable than rigidity. And those rulers who understood this truth ruled long and peacefully, leaving behind prosperous lands and contented people. High in the Kunlun Mountains, where clouds cling to sharp peaks, and the air is so rarefied that each breath comes with difficulty, people of a special kind settled. They were called immortals, though they were quite mortal beings of flesh and blood. They simply sought what seemed impossible, a way to stop time, defeat old age and death, become one with the eternal Tao. These hermits came to the mountains for different reasons. Some fled from worldly bustle, tired of endless intrigues and struggles for power. Some sought answers to questions that gave them no peace, day or night. And some simply felt that among people they would never find what their soul was seeking. In one such cave, carved by winds in red rock, lived a man named Wei Boyang. Once he had been a court alchemist, studying the transformations of metals and minerals, seeking ways to create gold from simple substances. But the more he learned about the nature of matter, the more he understood. True gold is not what glitters in royal treasuries. Every morning, Wei Boyang would go out to the platform before his cave and watch as the sun rose from behind distant ridges. The air was so pure, it seemed one could touch the luminary with one's hand. And in this purity, in this silence, broken only by the whistle of wind and the cry of mountain eagles, understanding came to him. He observed how the seasons changed in the mountains. In spring, snow melted, turning into rushing torrents that raced down to the valleys. In summer, rocks heated under the sun, and at night cooled so quickly that stones cracked from temperature changes. In autumn, winds brought the first snowflakes, and in winter, everything froze in icy silence. And in all these transformations, Wei Boyang saw the great law. Nothing in nature remains unchanged, but nothing disappears without a trace. Water becomes vapor. Vapor becomes clouds. Clouds become rain. Rain becomes water again. Everything flows, everything changes, but the essence remains unchanging. Gradually, he understood that he had been searching in the wrong place. Immortality is not in stopping changes, but in becoming part of this eternal cycle, not in reserving the body unchanged, but in the soul merging with what is truly eternal, with the very principle of change itself. In his cave, Wei Boyang arranged a small laboratory, but now he worked not with gold and silver, but with the same substances that make up the human body. He studied how breath transforms into energy, how food becomes strength, how thoughts influence the flow of blood. He discovered that the same processes occur in humans as in nature. There is something that rises upward, like vapor from heated water. This is yang energy, active and hot. And there is that which descends downward, like dew falling at dawn. This is yin energy, calm and cool. And when these two forces are in balance, a person is healthy and full of life. But Wei Boyang went further. He noticed that one could control these energies, direct their flow, as an engineer directs water through channels, through special breathing exercises, through meditation, through proper nutrition. One could achieve that the energies in the body would circulate as harmoniously as the seasons change. Other seekers began coming to him. Word of the mountain hermit, who had discovered the secrets of internal alchemy, spread slowly, but surely. People climbed mountain paths, risking their lives to hear his teaching. Wei Boyang taught them not how to make an elixir of immortality in a cauldron, but how to turn their own body into such a cauldron. He showed that true alchemy happens within us when we learn to live in harmony with natural rhythms. One of his students, a young man named Liu An, once asked, "Teacher, how many years must one practice to achieve immortality?" Wei Boyang smiled and pointed to an icicle that hung from the edge of the rock. "Do you see how it grows? Drop by drop, day by day. It does not hurry, does not try to become bigger by force. It simply follows its nature. And when spring comes, it does not die. It transforms into water and continues its journey." "So it is with us," he explained. "Immortality is not in our body, never aging. It is in our essence, our true nature, merging with what truly knows no death, with the Tao itself." Years passed. Students came and went. But Wei Boyang remained in his mountains. He recorded his observations, creating treatises on internal alchemy that would later become the foundation of Taoist practice of self-improvement. They contained no magical formulas, no promises of easy paths to immortality. There was only wisdom about how to live in harmony with natural laws. And when finally his body aged and his breath became weak, Wei Boyang did not grieve. He knew that death is simply another transformation, like the transformation of water into vapor. His students said that on the last day, he simply sat in meditation posture, closed his eyes, and dissolved into the mountain air like morning mist. Perhaps it was just a beautiful legend, or perhaps he really found what he was seeking, a way to become one with the eternal flow of life, where there is neither birth nor death, but only endless transformations of a single essence. In one of the temples in the valley, far from the mountain peaks where Taoist hermits sought immortality, lived a young monk. His name was Zhuang Zhou, but he was better known by the name Zhuangzi. Unlike the mountain sages, he did not strive for special practices or secret knowledge. He was interested in something simpler and at the same time deeper, the very nature of reality. Zhuangzi loved to observe. He could sit for hours in the temple garden, watching the play of light and shadow among the leaves, how the wind stirs the grass, how clouds change their outlines. And in these observations, he noticed something amazing. The whole world consists of opposites that constantly transform into each other. Day gives way to night. But where is that moment when day ends and night begins? Warmth turns into cold. But can one point to the exact boundary between them? Life gives way to death. But isn't the death of one the life of another? When the body returns to earth and nourishes new plants. He was especially fascinated by the water in the temple pond. In sunny weather, it was light and transparent, reflecting the sky so clearly that it seemed one could step into this reflection and find oneself among the clouds. On cloudy days, it darkened, became deep and mysterious. In winter, it was covered with ice. In summer, it bloomed. In autumn, yellow leaves that had fallen on its surface turned yellow. And Zhuangzi understood. These are not different waters. This is the same water that manifests different qualities depending on circumstances. Like an actor who plays different roles while remaining the same person. Once he noticed two monks arguing about what was more important, light or darkness. One claimed that light brings life, warmth, joy, while darkness brings cold, fear, death. The other objected that without darkness there would be no rest, peace, that seeds sprout precisely in dark earth, and sleep restores strength better than any medicine. Zhuangzi approached them and said, "Brothers, look at this yin-yang." He drew a circle in the sand and divided it with a wavy line into two parts, one light, the other dark. In the light part, he put a dark dot, and in the dark, a light one. Do you see? Light and darkness are not enemies fighting each other. They are partners in an eternal dance. In the brightest day, the seed of night is already contained. And in the deepest night, a new dawn is ripening. This simple symbol contained the deepest wisdom. The whole world is arranged according to the principle of complementary opposites. Male and female, up and down, inhale and exhale, compression and expansion. All these pairs seem opposite, but in reality, they are parts of one whole. Zhuangzi began studying this principle in all manifestations of life. He noticed that the wisest people are those who know how to combine opposite qualities in themselves. strong but gentle, like steel that bends but does not break, active but calm, like a mountain river that flows quickly but without haste, knowing but simple, like a master who can explain complex things in simple words. He recorded his observations in the form of short parables and paradoxes. Once I dreamed that I was a butterfly, he wrote. I fluttered among flowers, enjoyed the sun and nectar, and was completely happy. And now I have awakened and do not know. Am I Zhuangzi, who dreamed he was a butterfly? Or am I a butterfly dreaming that she is Zhuangzi? This parable spoke of how reality is not as simple as it seems. What we consider reality may turn out to be a dream, and what we dream may be more real than our ordinary life. A wise person does not cling to one point of view. He knows how to see things from different sides. Students began coming to Zhuangzi, attracted by his unusual wisdom. He taught them to see unity in diversity, to find harmony in contradictions. When a student complained about failures, he showed that failure is simply another face of success, an opportunity to learn something new. When someone grieved over a loss, he explained that loss frees up space for new acquisition. But the most important thing Zhuangzi taught was acceptance of the natural course of things. One should not fight changes, because change is the very essence of life. One should not fear difficulties, because after every winter, cold comes spring warmth. A wise person is like water. He takes the shape of the vessel he falls into, but preserves his flowing nature. The teaching about yin-yang, which Zhuangzi developed and deepened, became one of the cornerstones of Taoist philosophy. It showed that the world is not divided into absolute good and absolute evil, into right and wrong. Everything is relative. Everything depends on point of view and circumstances. This understanding brought people enormous relief. No longer did they need to torment themselves with guilt over their weaknesses. They too are part of the natural human nature. No longer did they need to strive for impossible perfection. It was enough to find balance between their light and dark sides. And when Zhuangzi grew old, he did not grieve about approaching death. Death, he told his students, is simply a transition from one state to another. like the transition from waking to sleep. We do not know what awaits us there, but we know it will be part of the same great dance of opposites that comprises the essence of all existence. Centuries passed, and the teaching about the Tao, born in the silence of mountains and by babbling streams, met with other great teachings that came to the Middle Kingdom. From the north and west came merchants and travelers, bringing news of distant lands and foreign wisdoms. From the south, through mountain passes, Idas penetrated from distant India, where people sought liberation from suffering through understanding the nature of mind. At this time in China lived a man named Kong Chu, whom posterity would call Confucius. He was the complete opposite of Taoist sages, where they called for naturalness and simplicity. He saw the need for order and rules. Where Taoists spoke of the strength of gentleness, he asserted the importance of firm principles. Confucius did not seek solitude in the mountains. On the contrary, he believed that a sage should serve society, help rulers create a just state, and help people live in harmony with each other. He developed a system of behavioral rules that was supposed to regulate all aspects of life, from family relations to state governance. At first, it seemed that Taoism and Confucianism were incompatible. Confucians considered Taoists idlers who shirked social duty. Taoists saw in Confucians people who had lost connection with naturalness and were trying to squeeze living life into dead schemes. But life is more complex than philosophical disputes. People needed both. In social life, they needed clear rules and principles of Confucius. And in personal life, alone with themselves, they sought the peace and naturalness that Taoism gave. Gradually, mutual influence began. Confucians understood that overly rigid rules could break a person, like strong wind breaks an oak. They began including elements of gentleness and flexibility in their teaching. Taoists, in turn, realized that complete detachment from the world could deprive them of the opportunity to help people. Thinkers appeared who tried to unite both teachings. One of them, philosopher Dong Zhongshu, created a system in which Confucian principles of social order combined with Taoist ideas about natural cycles and harmony of opposites. Even greater changes were brought by the appearance of Buddhism. This religion came from India through mountain passes and trade routes, bringing with it teachings about suffering and liberation, about rebirth of the soul and achievement of nirvana. Buddhist monks built monasteries, translated sacred texts, preached to people. Their teaching that all suffering comes from attachments found response in the hearts of many Chinese, tired of endless wars and social upheavals. But Buddhism, too, did not remain unchanged on Chinese soil. Here it met with Taoist wisdom about naturalness and simplicity. Chinese Buddhists began paying more attention to contemplating nature, meditation in mountains, seeking enlightenment through unity with the natural world. Thus was born the movement that would be called Chan Buddhism, and in Japan, Zen. In it, Buddhist ideas about the emptiness of all phenomena combined with Taoist ideas about spontaneity and naturalness. Chan masters taught that enlightenment can come suddenly, like lightning, in the most ordinary moment, when a person drinks tea, sweeps the yard, or simply sits in the garden. One such master, living in a mountain monastery, told students a parable about how he achieved enlightenment. For many years, I sought truth in sacred texts, meditated days on end, observed the strictest vows, and found nothing. But then one morning, I went out into the courtyard and saw how leaves were falling from a tree. They fell so naturally, without effort, simply because their time had come. And I understood. Here it is, truth. One need not force enlightenment to come. One must simply allow it to come, as leaves allow themselves to fall. This parable showed how Taoist principles of non-action and naturalness penetrated Buddhist practice. The wisdom of three teachings began merging into one, creating a unique Chinese spiritual tradition. Simple people did not delve much into the philosophical subtleties of differences between teachings. They took from each what helped them live. In the morning, they might pray to ancestors according to Confucian custom. During the day, reflect on the emptiness of the world in Buddhist fashion, and in the evening, contemplate the sunset in the spirit of Taoist naturalness. Thus, three great teachings, each of which claimed to possess truth, learned to coexist and mutually enrich each other. And in this, too, the ancient wisdom was manifested that opposites do not exclude, but complement each other, creating a fuller and richer picture of the world. In the era of the Tang Dynasty, when the empire was experiencing its golden age, and caravans with goods and ideas from distant countries flowed along the Silk Road, Taoist wisdom found special expression in art. Poets, artists, and calligraphers of that era did not simply depict the beauty of the world. They strove to convey its very essence, that inexpressible Tao that manifests in all existence. In the Zhongnan Mountains, not far from the capital Chang'an, stood a small house surrounded by a bamboo grove. Here lived a man whom contemporaries called the immortal poet. His name was Li Bo, and his poems were like mountain streams, bright, resonant, irrepressible in their striving toward the sea. Every morning, Li Bo went out into his garden and stood for long periods among the trees, listening to the rustle of foliage and the singing of birds. He did not strive to compose poems. He allowed them to be born by themselves, as flowers bloom on a branch when their time comes. His brush moved across paper easily and freely, as if following some inner rhythm beyond the control of reason. "The moon hangs among the pines," he wrote. "The stream babbles over stones." And in these simple lines, a whole universe was contained. The reader did not simply see a picture. He heard the silence of a mountain evening, felt the coolness of moonlight, sensed himself part of this piece. Li Bo never explained philosophical truths in his poems. He showed them. A bird flies over a lake, and the reader understands what freedom is. A cloud floats across the sky, and the nature of impermanence becomes clear. Water wears away stone, and the secret of patience and persistence is revealed. His friend, poet Wang Wei, went even further in merging poetry with Taoist wisdom. Wang Wei was not only a poet, but also an artist and musician. He believed that all arts speak of one thing, about the beauty of the natural world and about humanity's place in it. In his estate in the Zhongnan Mountains, Wang Wei created an amazing garden where every element was thought out and arranged according to principles of natural harmony. Paths curved like mountain trails. Ponds repeated the shape of mountain lakes, and pavilions were built so that from each a new view of the surrounding landscape opened. Here he spent days in contemplation and creativity. In the morning, he wrote poems, During the day, he painted landscapes with ink. In the evening, he played the qin, an ancient Chinese instrument whose sounds were like the noise of wind in pines. And in all these occupations, he followed one principle: not to impose his will on the material, but to allow it to manifest its true nature. His paintings were revolutionary for their time. Instead of detailed depiction of every leaf and pebble, he left large spaces of unpainted paper. This emptiness was not emptiness in the usual sense. It was full of possibilities, as silence is full of unborn sounds. Became a co-author. His imagination completed what was left unsaid, built up what was outlined. And in this lay deep wisdom. True art should not explain and show everything. It should awaken in a person the ability to see and feel for himself. Students and friends came to Wang Wei, among whom were the most famous poets of the era. They gathered in his garden, drank wine, admired the moon, and composed poems. But these meetings were not ordinary literary evenings. Here something greater happened. A new aesthetic was being created, based on Taoist principles of naturalness and spontaneity. One such evening was especially memorable to contemporaries. 7 poets gathered, and each was to compose a poem on a given theme. But instead of thinking and selecting words, they decided to act spontaneously. The first spoke a line, the second picked it up and continued. The third added his thought, and thus was born a poem that no one had planned, but which turned out beautiful precisely because each participant followed inner feeling rather than a preconceived scheme. This practice of collective creativity showed how Taoist principles work in art. When artists do not cling to their ego, do not strive to surpass each other, but follow a common flow of inspiration, something greater is born than the sum of individual talents. At the same time, the art of calligraphy developed in monasteries and academies. Master calligraphers understood that a character is not simply a way to record a word. Each sign carries energy, conveys mood, reflects the inner state of the one who writes it. Master Zhang Shu was known for his eccentricity. He could write characters while dancing, or create calligraphy while in a state of wine intoxication. His students at first did not understand such an approach, but the master explained, when the mind is silent, the brush itself finds the right path. What matters is not how you hold your hand, but how you feel each stroke. His characters truly seemed alive. Some rushed upward like flames, others spread across paper like mountain mists. Still others froze in majestic peace like ancient rocks. And each stroke was not simply an element of writing, but an expression of that life force that Taoists called Qi. Gradually, the principles of Taoist aesthetics spread to all types of art. Architects began building structures that did not oppose the natural landscape, but merged with it. Gardeners created parks where each turn of the path opened a new view, and each pavilion was positioned so that from it one could contemplate the change of seasons. Masters of applied arts also rethought their craft. Potters allowed clay to suggest the shape of a vessel itself. Stone carvers sought in each piece of jade or jasper the figure hidden within it and only freed it from excess material. Jewelers created ornaments that emphasized the natural beauty of stone rather than hiding it under layers of decoration. Thus art became a way of knowing the Tao. Through the artist's brush, through the poet's verse, through the musician's melody, people touched that inexpressible truth that lies at the foundation of all existence. And most amazing, this art required no special education or complex theories. It spoke directly to the heart, awakening in each person the ability to see beauty and harmony in the surrounding world. In one of the mountain villages of Henan province lived a man named Chen Wangting. He was a hereditary warrior who had studied martial arts since childhood. But all the styles he had learned seemed too rigid, based on strength and aggression. In his youth, this suited him. He was strong, fast, won in duels. But with years, he began to notice that brute force has its limits. Old masters, who in youth had yielded to him in strength, now easily defeated him using some unknown principles. Their movements were smooth and slow, but possessed strange effectiveness. They did not block his strikes with force. They redirected them, making his own energy work against himself. Chen Wangting began observing nature with a new purpose. He watched how water flows around stones, how wind bends grass, how birds fly, spending minimum energy, and gradually understood. In nature, there are no superfluous movements, no tension for the sake of tension. Every action is precise and economical. Every movement follows natural laws. He was especially struck by a scene he once witnessed. He was walking along a forest path and heard strange sounds, as if someone was fighting. Coming closer, he saw a crane fighting with a snake. The bird attacked with its long beak, but the snake evaded, bending its whole body. When the snake lunged at the crane, it retreated, spreading its wings and dancing around the opponent. The fight lasted long, but no one achieved decisive victory. The crane could not penetrate the snake's flexible defense, and the snake could not catch the light and mobile crane. In the end, both opponents parted, causing each other no serious harm. This scene became a revelation for Chen Wangting. He understood that true martial art is not about destroying the opponent, but about finding harmony, even in conflict. Strength should combine with gentleness, speed with slowness, advance with retreat. He began developing a new style based on principles he had seen in nature. Movements were slow and smooth, like the flow of a river. Each gesture flowed into the next without sharp stops, as seasons replace each other. Breathing coordinated with movement, creating an inner rhythm like the heartbeat of the earth. This style he called Tai Chi, the fist of the great ultimate. It contained techniques of crane and snake, tiger and dragon, but all were united by the principle of yin-yang. Each movement contained opposite principles, soft and hard, slow and fast, internal and external. Chen Wangting's first students were members of his family. He taught them not only fighting techniques, but also the philosophy that stood behind these techniques. An opponent is not an enemy to be destroyed, he explained. This is a partner in dance who helps you understand your own nature. The goal of combat is not victory, but harmony. Training took place at dawn, when the air was fresh and the mind clear. Students slowly performed forms, concentrating not on the force of strikes, but on correctness of movements. Each gesture should originate from the body's center, from that place where life energy qi is concentrated. Gradually, students noticed amazing changes. Their health improved, their minds became calmer, and their bodies more flexible and strong. But most importantly, they began relating differently to conflicts in daily life. Instead of responding to aggression with aggression, they learned to find peaceful ways to resolve problems. Fame of the new martial art spread slowly but surely. Masters of other styles came to Chen Wangting to test the effectiveness of his method, and many left shaken. This no longer young man easily defeated them without using brute force. His body was relaxed, movements unhurried, but each touch of his hand possessed strange, penetrating power. The secret was that Chen Wangting had learned to use not only muscular strength, but also that internal energy that Taoist sages spoke of. He directed Qi through his body like a gardener directs water through channels. And this energy, invisible and intangible, proved far more powerful than any muscles. But the most important achievement of the new style was that it showed Tao principles can be applied not only in meditation or art, but in the most practical situations. Even in battle, one can remain a sage. Even in conflict, one can follow the path of harmony. Chen Wangting's students passed knowledge further, and Tai Chi spread throughout China. Different schools and directions arose, each with its own features, but all united by common principles. Gentleness conquers hardness, slow surpasses fast, internal is more important than external. And in our days, when the world has become completely different, when people live in huge cities amid the noise of machines and the flicker of screens, the ancient wisdom of Tai Chi continues to help them find peace and strength in their own bodies, harmony amid the chaos of modern life. The sun was just beginning to rise over mountain peaks, painting clouds in gentle shades of pink and gold, when people began gathering in a small park in the center of Beijing. They came individually and in small groups, elderly men and women, young students, office workers hurrying to work, but who had found time for morning practice. This was an ordinary scene for any Chinese city. In every park, on every square, by every lake, one could see people slowly and smoothly performing Tai Chi movements. Some practiced alone immersed in contemplation of their own sensations. Some followed an experienced master, repeating ancient forms after him. Among them was an elderly woman named Li Mei. Once she had worked as an engineer at a large factory, lived in constant stress, suffered from headaches and insomnia. Doctors prescribed medications, but they helped little. And then a neighbor advised her to try Tai Chi. At first, Li Mei was skeptical. What good could come from slow movements? But when the pain became completely unbearable, she decided to try. The first lessons were difficult. Her body was stiff, breathing erratic. Mind could not concentrate. But the teacher, a gray-haired man of about 70, who moved with the grace of a young dancer, patiently explained, "Do not think about results. Simply follow your breathing. Allow movements to flow like water flows. Your body knows what it needs. You just need to learn to listen to it." Month after month, Li Mei came to the park. Gradually, movements became more natural, breathing deeper and calmer. And she began noticing changes not only in her body, but in consciousness. Former worries and anxieties did not disappear, but stopped seeming so important. A sense of inner peace appeared that she had not known for many years. Beside her practiced a young programmer named Wang Hao. He had come to Tai Chi for a different reason. Computer work, constant eye strain, sedentary lifestyle had made his body weak and inflexible. Friends laughed at his hobby. Why should a young man do gymnastics for old people? But Wang Hao understood what his friends did not. In the slow movements of Tai Chi lay deep wisdom about how to live in harmony with one's own body. Each morning, spent in the park, gave him energy for the whole day. Work stopped seeming exhausting. Clarity of thought appeared that had not been there before. In another part of the park, a group of foreign students studied Tai Chi basics under the guidance of a young master. These were Americans, Europeans, people from different countries who had come to China to study or work. For them, Tai Chi was a way to touch ancient culture, to understand something important about the Chinese way of thinking. John, a student from America studying Chinese philosophy, told friends, "I have read dozens of books about Taoism, learned many terms and concepts, but only when I began practicing Tai Chi Quan did I understand what Tao really is. This is not theory. This is living experience that can be felt with every cell of the body. The master who led their group was a descendant of one of the traditional Tai Chi Quan schools. His grandfather had studied with students of Chen Wangting himself. But he was not a conservative, clinging to old forms. He understood that ancient wisdom must adapt to modern conditions. People today live differently, he explained to students. They have different problems, a different rhythm of life, but the principles remain the same: harmony of yin and yang, following natural flow, strength born from peace. What matters is not mechanical repetition of movements, but understanding what stands behind them. He taught his students not only Tai Chi Quan forms, but also basics of Chinese medicine, philosophy, culture. Tai Chi Quan, he said, is not just physical exercises. It is a way of thinking, a way of life, a path to understanding oneself and the world. In the mountains, far from urban bustle, real hermits still lived. In the White Cloud Monastery, built on the slope of Mount Huashan, dwelt a small community of Taoist monks. They followed ancient traditions, rose before dawn, meditated, studied classical texts, practiced internal alchemy. Master Li, abbot of the monastery, was a man of extraordinary wisdom and tranquility. Pilgrims who climbed into the mountains to receive his guidance were amazed by the simplicity of his words and the depth of his understanding. He did not give long lectures, did not quote ancient texts. He simply lived according to Tao principles, and his very life was a teaching. The Tao cannot be explained in words, he told visitors. It can only be experienced. Therefore, do not seek complex theories and secret practices. Look at clouds, listen to wind. Observe how light changes during the day. All answers are already around you. But even in mountain monasteries, life was gradually changing. Young monks used the internet to study texts and communicate with like-minded people around the world. Ancient practices were recorded on video and distributed through social networks. Wisdom that for centuries had been passed only from teacher to student was becoming accessible to all humanity. Thus, the ancient teaching about the way of water continued its flow in the modern world. It took new forms, found new paths of dissemination, but the essence remained unchanged. In a world where everything accelerates and becomes more complex, people still needed simple wisdom about how to be flexible but strong, how to find peace amid storm, how to follow the natural rhythm of life. And each morning, when the sun rose over cities and villages, in parks and squares, in mountain monasteries, and on seashores, people began their day with slow, smooth movements that connected them with ancient wisdom and helped find harmony in the complex modern world. Water still flowed around stones, not fighting with them, but steadily finding its way to the sea.